we've heard bits and pieces of this through other sessions over the course of the day, but in general, I'm going to give a fairly open-ended question around the topic of visibility in general. There's elements of visibility from kind of a talent and skill set perspective. There's elements around what do you make visible when and what do you do with the visibility information once you have it. There's the aspect of how does visibility kind of enhance collaboration. So we'll start with you, Darrell. You can kind of take visibility anywhere you want. I know you and I spoke before. You've got a passion around talent, which I think is an element of getting value out of visibility.
Okay. So I think, Mike, you hit on it. I guess if you talk about the topic of visibility, it's a fairly ambiguous topic, and in many cases somewhat new for us as we begin to kind of venture into, into what we're doing in business. But and as you said a few moments ago, I'm very passionate about talent, and so when I think about talent, the talent equation and visibility, to me, in this world, this ever-changing world we're living in, where security among your information is incredibly important. We continue to hear about this even this week. And it's incredibly important to me if we're trying to build relationships and try to ensure that we partner with the supplier-customer equation, that we equip ourselves talent-wise, with the ability to take and, move into that next venue. And to me, from a talent perspective, at least, there's two things that come to mind when I couple that with visibility. One is trust, and one is competence. So if I'm going to partner with the customer-supplier relationship, if I'm going to partner with my cohort, I want to make sure that my talent, my team, has the competence to build the trust that we can share information and we feel comfortable with that. And one of the ways we try really hard to do that, at least with my team, it's interesting when I talk to people, they say, Darrell, you're responsible for a lot of different disciplines, from a manufacturing, from a distribution standpoint, from a sales and operation planning standpoint. Where do you spend most of your time? And I will tell you, I spend over 50% of my time on the talent management piece. It's interesting with all those different disciplines, where I spend my time is with the talent management piece. And so to me, as we venture forward in visibility, I think it's incredibly important that we build trust, that we have competence with our key team players, and that, in my opinion, is really only achieved through the talent management process. And so when I say talent management, what does that mean, right? So I spend a fair amount of time with assessing current talent. I tend to think that there's a really healthy blend of, we do at least, bringing 50% of external talent, acquiring that outside, bringing it in to our internal expertise and our internal talent. I do believe in that philosophy that a high tide raises all boats. So if we go out and acquire really, really smart people, they bring new ideas, new thinking into our business that helps us get a lot better. So I think that's a big deal. And we also spend a lot of time, a couple of times a year, really looking at our talent from a standpoint of, do we have the right people? Do we have the right skill sets? What are our people's aspirations, career development plans? Where are our gaps from a skill set standpoint? What do we do to take and increase the robustness of talent management?
Great. So Jeremy, when we say visibility, kind of what's that mean in your environment?
Yeah, so in our world, I kind of think, visibility means to see something. Data is a proxy to seeing the physical thing. If we could all go see, actually somehow, if Star Trek engineers would have been busy and had their transporter machines, you could just send your employee to the warehouse to see if it was really there. So you'd be able to see things, and then so seeing data, and that's what we try to help with. But doing that in a world where the kind of data, the type of data are all, it's increasing in multiple dimensions. New kinds of data that didn't exist before, that didn't need to be shared before, and then also just the quantity and frequency of the data. So to drive real specifically, if you think about inventory visibility specific to dropshipping, I'm a retailer, I don't have the product, I need to see what my supplier actually has. In the wholesale world, maybe once a week, inventory visibility goes on a Tuesday, your buyer knows, so they just wait till Tuesday to know how much they can buy. Versus in dropshipping, you say, let's go to every 15 minutes. That's pretty close to real time. So you take 7, you take 1 times 7 times 24 times 4. That's the math. It's like 1,000 times increase in the amount of data that you need to show. So I think visibility, when I think about that, is just it's data, and it's something that has just increased in these massive orders of magnitude, and that makes it really, really difficult, especially where most of the current solutions in the world are not geared for that. Yeah. They were born in an era where that was not what was happening. Yeah. So the business models get in the way.
So Deb, how about from the SAP perspective?
So this is a tough question for me, actually, because I'm all over the place in my mind where we mean visibility. But to the point of, I've heard a lot this morning about reducing cycle times, reducing lead times, whether it's from designing, we just heard about, or through lead times through our suppliers' deliveries, and reducing costs. The visibility is not only knowing where your inventories are, but also to be able to share and collaborate around things like your planning, your collaboration about your design plans, things like that. And even to be able to have visibility for security as to what are your suppliers doing, and where is the risk in the supply chain as far as issues that may come up, or being able to predict in the future where you need to move things forward. So there's a lot of topics around visibility. I don't think I can pinpoint any direct one, but there's a lot of things that are in the marketplace that customers, retailers, suppliers, brands that are trying to really have a bigger, broader picture on where they're.
One of the things that you mentioned in your initial discussion around kind of things that you cover, I think visibility as it relates to risk management is an area that's probably underserved right now in terms of understanding where your suppliers are, what their capabilities are, and where are they relative to whether it's economic or weather or geopolitical. Being visible to that so that you can make appropriate contingency plans, I think is a use case for visibility that we're just starting to scratch the surface on. So we've got, as I said, your questions are going to be better than mine. The one that I get a lot when I talk to our retailers is this idea around trust. So let's maybe, Darrell, we'll start with you. This middle question, how do you build trust with a supplier that has historically been transactional in nature, and try to move them into an area where what we would call kind of joint value creation is happening?
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, there's obviously several ways you can do it. One of the things I think is you start with small victories and small wins. We try really hard to put ourselves, our partners, in a position to see some mutual benefit, and we look for small victories that benefit both parties. And over time, with those win-win relationships, clearly trust can improve. Additionally, as we said a few minutes ago, we try really hard to, when we start a new venture with a new business partner, to put very smart, very competent people that have capabilities in place that can benefit both parties. So you don't want to make a lot of mistakes. You want to have some missteps. You want to take and let your partner down initially. And so that initial potential misstep could create some problems from a trust factor. So I guess to sum it up, in my opinion, it would be, put some of your best partners, your best people on this project early. Look for mutual small wins that create value for both parties, and then build on that with the next phase of trust.
So Jeremy, maybe from your side, what have you seen? How have you seen people kind of work through this?
Yeah, I think one of the major things around trust is, I think, it's just simplistic cliche of the golden rule, like treat other people like you want to be treated, and then in our world, what that gets to is you're trying to share information and data, but historically the retailer has kind of been the one that makes those decisions, and the suppliers are the ones that complain about those decisions, right. And that creates this dynamic of friction, right? Like, and then the suppliers can't comply. Well, why can't they comply? Well, because they're getting told to do data 60 ways. If they work with 60 retailers, they have 60 ways, and so then they don't comply because it's like almost impossible. So then you introduce compliance, right? Well, if you didn't comply, now I'm going to penalize you. And that's basically like, a quick version of like right. The last 30 years of the retail supplier supply chain dynamic. And, drop shipping, then you take it and say, I got to do more data more often, and that's the environment you live inside of. And so I think the thing that we think of there is like, well, can you get data from somebody the way that they would prefer rather than the way that you would prefer? That's that golden rule effect. And so, find a way to do that internally, or find a way to partner with solution providers who can enable that, versus move away from this like, hey, if we want to be partners, but it's like somebody's got to put the I guess the olive leaf out there and say, right. Hey, we're going to change the way we've historically done things. So I care about what you need and your issues versus only mine.
How about from your side? What have you seen?
Again, I think this is an area that both the retailers and the manufacturers and distributors are seeing a way to better collaborate and share information, because at the end of the day, we're all in this world together, right? And so improving the collaboration, reducing costs is a supply chain, is a shared supply chain requirement. And I think if we can, remove, I think I read something just recently that retailers gain like 13% of their revenue comes from things like chargebacks. And so manufacturers are always looking at ways of how can they reduce that chargeback cost and reduce it. And eliminate, it's kind of like the insurance business, right? You've got to pay a premium to do business with your customers. But if we can eliminate some of that friction that we talked about, that would be a big way to gain trust and work together.
I would agree. So I'm going to take this next question. I don't mean to ignore it. I am probably the least knowledgeable of blockchain of anyone in this room. I don't know if Joe is still here from earlier today. I'm a dinosaur when it comes to that. Are any of you guys comfortable commenting on blockchain and retail? Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.
I can tell you a little bit about blockchain.
Go right ahead.
So blockchain comes up a lot in our business. We're working, SAP ARIBA is working with companies that are, for example, in the diamond jewelry, where they've got to be able to track and keep trace of high value products, and they want to make sure that they have authenticity to what they're selling throughout the thing. Arts is another area of where we see blockchain capabilities. The other area where blockchain kind of comes up a lot is in the area of drugs, for example, right? So there's a lot of track and trace compliancy that's required there. They have to keep track of the serialization and the authenticity that the drugs are pure and legal. So we have to make sure we track that, and that comes up as part of something that we need to continue to look at. And companies are going to continue to innovate in this area. I don't think we just started the surface of this. So there's a lot of growth opportunity as well.
Okay. Jeremy, any thoughts?
We spent my VP of engineering and I spent a little bit of time on this like a year ago. There's some really neat things there, like more so than, you think about inventory visibility, like there needs to be a master virtual representation of the physical world. That's what you're going for, whether that's internal to a retailer, whether that's retailers to their trading partners upstream, suppliers, all those things. There's some interesting things with blockchain that might be able to help with that kind of masterization. Is that a word, masterization? But we kind of looked at it and it's like, yeah, this is like a decade away, so let's come back at it another point in time.
Okay. Darrell, from your side?
Mike, I'm probably behind you in your expertise in block shipping,
All right.
so I'll defer.
It's a really good question. Whoever asked that, we have started some research on the Gartner side around what blockchain could mean to the supply chain. That research will do a much better job than I would ever attempt. So if you want to see me after this and give me your card, I can share some of that research. We definitely have taken a position. Gartner IT has taken a position. It's just not something I've spent a lot of time with. So appreciate the question, and thanks, guys, for kind of addressing that. So let's go to one that's probably a little bit easier. Biggest challenge with dropship.
So yeah, from retail perspective, I'm looking at that. So we're probably a little different than maybe some of the people in the room and maybe perhaps my colleagues. We're fully, not only a manufacturer, but a retailer as well. We're a fully integrated business. And we believe, at least, we have a brand. We're very proud of our brand. We're very proud of our products. And so drop shipping for us, we have to consider the overall brand experience. And from literally from order entry until, we're looking at manufacturing, we're looking at the retail experience, we're looking at also the customer delivery experience, the final mile. So one of the largest challenges for us is we're very proud of the product and the brand, is how do we retain that wonderful customer experience throughout the entire process. So we like to own that. So I don't think, at least for us, we haven't decided or cracked the code on handing drop shipping off of some of our products to a third party provider or another provider, because we want to own that experience and we want to own the long-term relationship with our customer. Someone buys one of our Lazy Boy products in our retail environment, we want to be able to customize and personalize that product for them. We want to be able to make sure that also that experience continues through as the product reaches their home, and we still want to own that. So for us, cracking the code, at least if you will, if you are a branded company, of retaining that experience from order entry all the way through customer delivery is still a bit of a challenge.
How about Jeremy, from your side on the data and dropship, maybe from the idea that I'm gonna reach out to my suppliers, have them carry inventory for me that maybe I'm not going to carry. maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing from your space around that.
Yeah, it's the drop shipping in a pure way, I guess the way that we see it, this retailer does not have the physical inventory, and some third party, one of their suppliers, one of their brands does. So you've created this it's a dual virtual problem. You have a virtual problem if you're a retailer because somebody's on somebody's at jeremyscoolstore.com, that's virtual. But now you've got another virtual problem because you're expanding the physical side as well in this virtual snapshot way. And so, that creates some really interesting, challenges, and it comes back to kind of my comments earlier. It's about data, and it's about the frequency and accuracy of that data, and ultimately it's about being able to partner with and trust potentially hundreds or even thousands of other companies with that. And for all of you who know how hard it is for your own organizations to have that data flow, thinking about expanding it to that kind of scale is where the challenge comes from. It's important to remember it's not just another fulfillment method, right? It's not just here's our business and this is just a different way to fulfill. It's a completely different business model. You're asking suppliers to hold inventory. You're asking them to do last mile fulfillment logistics. You're basically asking them to do like half of your job of a retailer of what you used to, the role reverse, the role separation and segmentation. And so it's difficult for both sides. And I think, the last thing I'll say on that is that I think the biggest challenge for retailers with dropshipping is to realize that their supplier in dropshipping is more important than they are. Like, it's not like 90-10, but it's like 60-40, right? Like, supply and demand, retailer is still the demand aggregator, but if you want to expand product assortment and do drop shipping, you've tipped it to 60-40. Yeah. The supplier is now, because that's the inventory. And if you want to look at super challenges, go sell something that doesn't really exist and see how that goes with your customer. So that's why I say it kind of tips to the supply side. And then thinking of that way and acknowledging that way, and then rolling out dropshipping programs or managing dropshipping programs to account for the fact that you're at least equal partners, and it's no more supplier and vendor, retailer and vendor. It's like equal partnership. If not, maybe I should treat my suppliers with white gloves because they're kind of more of it than I am.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction because if we think about where the balance of power has been traditionally in retail, it's lived with the retailer, right? In terms of the demand signal, dictating terms, all those types of things. And I think, Jeremy, you're spot on. As we move, which I believe we will, into more and more dropship for lots of different reasons, I think that paradigm is going to have to shift for retailers. They will have to start to see those dropship partners as partners. And I think, to me, that in and of itself, while it sounds simple, that in fact may be one of the biggest challenges. Because we can do things through technology. We can create frequencies around looking at things and those types of things from a visibility perspective. But if we never change our paradigm from, equal to they're a little bit more important than I am, all of this stuff I think is just not going to work.
Yeah, we actually have a swear jar, kind of a swear jar at Dsco, and if anybody says the word vendor, because it's a semantic thing, right?
Yes.
It's simple, but the word vendor is never used in a positive way. Like, damn those vendors, right? That's the framework. And so, yeah, we don't use that word, right? We've stricken the word from any of our collateral, our information, our supports, and if you say it, you put money in a pot, just because we want to, as a company, align to where we think the world is going.
Well, that's great. That's a great idea. We had talked about a swear jar for the panels, but we quickly nixed that.
Yeah.
Deb, go ahead.
Okay. So I think there's a couple things I want to talk about with this. So one is certainly in the challenge of the logistics of it all, right? So managing the visibility of inventory to make sure that that you could, once a supplier or a trading partner, what do you call them in your
Trading
world?
partners.
Trading partners. So once a trading partner ships something to a customer, that how do you know when to invoice the customer and when do you pay the supplier? So having that visibility and triangulating the logistics, the supplier, and the retailer together is something from a technology perspective. The second thing I think is important is if you expect your trading partners to do things like drop ship, and they want to get closer to the customer because that's what the end game is. It's try to reduce the cost, reduce the inventory that's in the supply chain. But they also have to have that visibility. In order to ship it, they have to know what the demand streams are going to be. So sharing that forecast so that they can predict what they need to ship, when they need to ship it, and so they can be responsible. So it's not just sharing inventory, but to be able to collaborate around demand plans. And then the third thing, I think that we're seeing a lot of changes as well. We're working currently with companies like UPS and HP in the world of 3D printing, which is, to me, a variation on the drop shipping and getting closer to the customer, right? And to be able to have customers come in and say, I need this product right away, and be able to send it out to the printer so that they can deliver it to the customers in a timely manner, reducing cost of shipment, cost of carrying inventory throughout the entire supply chain is another new disruptive trend that we're seeing in this area as well.
Great. So we have one, Jeremy, specifically for you. So let's because I think what you can share around what's worked well, I think will be pretty transferable for everyone. So why don't you take a shot at a use case around where dropship worked well for both the retailer and the supplier?
Yeah, so I'll tell a story from a conference called RVCF. We actually work with Nordstrom as one of our customers and one of our key partners. And we were there in 2015, and this is when Nordstrom had decided to use the Dsco platform to power their dropshipping, data exchange, data things. And this is basically the kind of conversation where, hey, guess what? I'm the retailer. I still have all the power. And if you want to continue to do business with me, you have to go do all this work, all this IT work. And in essence, you have to reintegrate inventory visibility, order exchange, and invoicing to these guys at Dsco. That's not a conversation that goes well. But what I saw is when, because of the way that we see the world, we take this abstraction and we say we're not ever integrating two people to directly. We don't allow retailers or suppliers to dictate things to each other, right? We become kind of the dictator by default. We'd rather do it than let the either side do it. And so there was conversation with folks many times. We had high fives. We had the wave. We had a big hug. And these were the compliance and the IT folks, right? It's the people who realized, okay, I do have to go do work, but I at least have some amount of control over how that work looks and how it processes. And I get to make some of my own decisions. It's not just like, here's the huge big checklist. It has to be the Nordstrom way. So that's what popped into my head. It's just, this idea that when you start off with, look, we're asking you to do something, and it's work, right? And like most companies, maybe work is a 4-letter word at your company, but we're at least going to allow you to do that work in a way that is simple and easy, and from your perspective. That's the thought that I had.
Great.
I don't know if that's a good example or not.
No, I think it is. I mean, I think, again, it speaks to your earlier comment about recognizing kind of where the shift of power and when it's happening and how do you facilitate that discussion. I'm going to come to kind of off Slido just for a moment to you, Darrell, around what's the biggest thing you've learned so far relative to effective collaboration, and just share that with the group.
Wow. I'll take a page out of Jeremy's book here in a few moments ago. Is collaboration with any of our business partners, our trading partners, even within our business. It's treating people the way you want to be treated. I think it never hurts. It's absolutely the right thing. And to me, I guess if I could use in a word, one term or one word that we at least work very hard to do, and that's transparency. I think if people are genuine, if people are authentic, if they're transparent with each other, and we are very clear about our common goals and objectives for the business, so that we do work very hard to build win-win relationships, because we truly believe those are the only long-term relationships that survive. I think you enhance the probability of success. So fully be transparent, be genuine and authentic, and very clear about the objectives of the business.
Okay, Jeremy.
I don't know. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, Deb.
Come back to me.
I'll come back to you.
I was just thinking drink time. I was going somewhere different. So, yeah, I think I agree with what's been said so far. I don't have a, I don't know. I think that the ability to have a relationship with your supplier and working together with your trading partner, I should say, is probably very key, and it can, again, drive down costs and be transformational in what you do in your day-to-day business.
Okay. So Jeremy, I'll give you a different question.
Yeah.
Given where you sit in the ecosystem, when you think about trying to match a retailer and a supplier kind of through your platform, for the retailers in the audience, I guess, what's the biggest gap you've seen in their ability to take the best advantage of your platform, whether it's data issues, people issues, skill set issues? If you had a couple that you think people could kind of start to work on now, what would those be?
Yeah, I think it's because of that historical retailer in power, retailer is the dictator. A lot of times it's kind of like, hey, all of the problems with dropshipping are on the supply side. My fulfillment rate isn't fast enough. Well, that's a problem. My fulfillment rate isn't high enough. I 1 out of every 100 orders, or maybe more. Maybe it's 5 out of every 100 orders don't actually ever get fulfilled. It's not real. Or things don't ship. It's just that compliant kind of mentality. They've got to hit my SLAs. But there's two sides, right? So if you're on the supply side, and if I were a supplier and a retailer says, hey, I'd like you, I'm buying wholesale, maybe I'm not, maybe I want to test with you and see if I want to do that, or however I get there, I'd like you to hold inventory that I can sell virtually. The first question that I would have would be what? How much of it are you going to sell? Because I kind of need to know that. And so, and a lot of times the retailers say, I have no idea. And then everybody says, okay, let's do this thing. And then, if you're a decent sized retailer who can generate a lot of demand, you could sell through their inventory in 15 minutes. And so even if you get every 15-minute inventory updates, you could blow through their inventory, within minutes. And so, that's actually a retail problem, right? And so as being a kind of a good partner is to understand that there's always two sides to it. Maybe I am a really good supplier and I do update inventory every 15 minutes, but then, once it hits the retailer, it lands in an IBM AS400 system that was built in the 1970s. And then, after it gets fully plumbed, the .com bolt-on that they've done, finally, like 4.5 hours later, gets the update, right? So I'm a supplier doing every 15-minute updates, so pat me on the back for doing a good job. But my retailer is 4.5 hours late. So that's, so I would say from a retailer perspective is understand that everything it's all becoming the same. More data, faster data, and if your world as a retailer isn't doing that well, then that's just going to be exacerbated in a drop shipping scenario. So you don't need something like a Dsco to help you. We'd love to help you, but you probably need to have those other things higher on the list. I think retail has been enamored with this shiny object, multiple shiny objects. It's like that squirrel, and what it is I need a website, and then now I need to deal with social, and now I need to deal with mobile. And there's been these massive waves of demand side of innovation and change that have hit in the last 20 years. But they're all bolt-onable. They're all bolt-onable, right? You can bolt it onto your old world. So as hard as that's been for retail to try to keep track of, you've ignored the hard stuff. Like it's your ERP systems, it's the engines of your business, it's your supply chain. That's the stuff that is super, super, super hard. And right now, what we're seeing in the market is the shiny object world has so far outpaced the rest of the actual real physical, kind of hard world that people can't keep up. So I would just say, spend a lot of time and energy. Like maybe stop working on your website for a couple years, as much as that might seem counterintuitive, and work on under the hood stuff, because otherwise what you're going to need to be able to do isn't going to be helped by something like what the software that we build and a lot of other companies are building.
Yeah, I would agree completely. When I look at and reflect on the conversations I've had with retailers, Jeremy, I couldn't agree more. We've spent the last 3 to 5 years, making cool websites to bring people into our e-com, unified commerce type of environment, only to disappoint them because we can't get them stuff, right? Because our WMS system is 10 or 15 years old, or I don't have a demand planning tool that can understand when and where I need stuff. So I agree with you. I mean, definitely, I think anyone who's spent any time in retail knows we are guilty of the shiny object syndrome. I mean, now it is unified commerce, and it's been the shiny object for a while. And I think to some degree rightly so, but there is a whole slew, we talked about it this morning, there's a whole slew of supply chain capabilities that if you do not invest in those today, it doesn't matter how cool your website is because you won't get stuff to people, right? It's that simple. So let's change gears a little bit and let's talk, because again this morning I talked a little bit about metrics. So I'd be curious, Darrell, we'll start with you. how do you measure the success of your collaborative relationships? Do you have some formal metrics that maybe you could share? Are there other ways that you know those relationships are working out? Because I like what you said earlier about win-win. You know, we talk about joint value creation at Gartner. I'd be curious, how do you kind of evaluate that you're delivering those win-win relationships?
Yeah, well, we look at it from a couple of different perspectives. You know, from the customer-facing, or from, you know, I guess you could say the retail side. We certainly look at Net Promoter Scores,
Okay.
yeah, and see, you know, are we winning in the hearts and minds of our customers or consumers? You know, from a delivery standpoint, from you know, from a product standpoint, from a retail execution standpoint. On the back end of the business, clearly we have certain metrics that we look at from a customer service standpoint. You know, from order fulfillment, from speed to the customer, speed to the consumer. We look at you know, on-time shipping performance, the basic metrics. And people, you know, when people ask me a lot of the questions regarding, Mike, that you just did about metrics, and they say, well, those seem to be pretty basic, pretty general. It's been my experience that executing the basics really, really well is a key differentiator in really winning or losing. I mean, we can come up and we can develop really wonderfully complex metrics, but to me, reducing complexity and executing the basics well, both on the back end from a metric standpoint, on the front end, is a true differentiator in the marketplace.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Deb, let me go to excuse me. Let me go to you with that one as well,
Okay.
just based on your experiences.
So I agree with the metrics you had put up earlier this morning as well. But one of the things that we look at, and I think it's an interesting one, is obviously days inventory. You had that up there, but there is the inventory that you own, and then there's also the liability inventory that's in the supply chain that also should be considered. One of the customers we're working with right now is Microsoft, and they made a major change in their forecast on the Surface Pros that they produce. And that change was not communicated effectively to their suppliers and their suppliers, which costs them billions of dollars in the liability of the supply chain. So they're using the SAP ARIBA solution to kind of bring that collaboration, both on the design, from the sourcing and the design perspective, as well as the planning, to help reduce not only the inventory that they're using through better collaboration, but also the liability inventory that's through the supply chain.
So, Jeremy, maybe just a slight twist on that, because I hear exactly what you're saying, Darrell, around, you know, measuring the basics, getting really good at those types of metrics. But I'd be curious, Jeremy, from where you sit in the ecosystem, are there some metrics that you've kind of come across that maybe are a little bit different that you think people could start to take a look at?
Yeah, I actually, when you asked the question, I had the same thought of Darrell around the idea of like Net Promoter Score, but more of a B2B version of that. You know, like in essence, you know, it's a simplistic kind of way to measure, but you know, asking that to your trading partners would be super interesting, especially if you could do that across multiple retailers and then rank it. Because I kind of think that you'd find that the retailers that are a little less on compliance, a little less on chargebacks and stuff like that, you know, it would surface. So that was one thought. The other thing for us that we're working on is trying to help surface the ability to compare and contrast the virtual world with the physical world. You know, so something like fulfillment rate, had 100 orders shipped. Like, what's the order certainty? You know, ship timing, like SLAs, like, okay, I got the order by 12 Pacific, whatever the timing is, it actually shipped. You know, that's the physical, right? That's a metric around the physical world. There's upstream virtual data that is a predictor, or, you know, that is potentially correlated or even contrasted with that, and that's something that we're spending a lot of time right now, is trying to watch data we see to see if we can predict. So can the virtual world predict the physical world? Or do we find people who are really good at data? Like we can see their inventory changing all the time. Like, I mean, it's constantly in flux within minutes, but then their fulfillment rate's 93%. You know, so what's the value of kind of trying to measure metrics around the pure question of, in essence, are you good at data? And then the other question is, are you good in the physical world? And seeing where those things align or where they don't align. I think that's something that's new. It's new for us at least, but for companies to think about that idea of, like, are you good at data? And if you can do that in a way that's quantified and consistent, then that we think that there will be some insights there and some actionability that can help people make better decisions.
Okay. I'm going to come back to something that we talked a little bit about, maybe just from a slightly different perspective. And Deb, I'll start with you, just given your broad experiences across SAP and ARIBA. If you had to pinpoint right now kind of one big challenge that's hindering progress in the retailer-supplier collaborative relationship, what would it be? Is it a people process? At very high level, people process and technology, where would you see kind of the biggest barrier right now?
Surprisingly, I'd say it's the people processes. I mean,
Okay.
so SAP, we bring together people, processes, and technology, but I think the biggest barrier oftentimes is the change management that's required to move companies transformationally.
Okay. Jeremy, how about you, from where you sit?
Yeah, it's a mindset. I think it's like most organizations have a large number of people, and at the frontline level, there's just a lot of friction. And you know, when you talk to execs in management, they say, "How do I get my people out of the weeds?" But it's a completely different way to see the world. You know, you have to have a different mindset.
Okay. Darrell, from your side?
Oh, it's clearly the people piece. Yeah, from my perspective, it's absolutely it's what Jeremy and Deb has said. It's aligning the talent with with the skill set with the mission in hand, and making sure that you cohesively get that to operate. People's always the challenge for me.
Okay. Yeah, I would submit that from what my conversations with retailers, I would put people at the top. You know, when we think about how people are incented, how we want to structure those relationships, very rarely does it come down to, I don't have a technology, right? Because worst case, there's a lot of collaboration going on with email and Excel, right? Everyone's got that. So technology tends to not be the issue. It does come down to the mindset of the retailer and I think you said it very well, the idea of going into this, we're going to establish win-win relationships. I saw, hopefully no one's here from GE, I saw a quote from someone around GE's approach to collaboration, which is GE wins twice. So that to me is not necessarily helpful. Let me, because again, I want to keep us on time. Those of you that were here earlier, you know I'm from a Myers-Briggs perspective, I'm an ISTJ, so it's all about structure and it's all about time adherence. So I want to give each of you guys one last chance to either something I didn't ask you that you wish I did have, or maybe just something you've learned over your time, because you've all got tons of experience in this area. Maybe one thing to give the group to think about as they're going next door to get some cocktails around collaboration. You're up.
All right, I'm up. All right. Yeah, I think I said a few moments ago what I truly have found through my years of experience. I tend to misquote people, so I apologize if I get this wrong, but I think it was Yogi Berra who said, "I'm full of great advice, and all my great advice comes from bad experiences." Well, that tends to be some of my life's learnings as well, and it's been, at least from my perspective, it's when it comes to collaboration, I think it's incredibly important for all of us to be very transparent with people. No hidden agendas. We're very authentic and very genuine and very sincere. And as long as we both know, whether it be internally of the organization or external of the organization, what the objectives, what the mission is, and we're very transparent with each other, I think we can build a successful, winning, long-term relationship. And I use that word long-term because I believe for all of us to exist into the next generation, we want to build long-term relationships as business partners. So transparency, in my opinion, is a silver bullet.
Yep. Agreed. Jeremy?
I'm going to quote what Darrell said earlier about belief in that a rising tide lifts all ships. There's enough change happening in the world, but ultimately it's about supply and demand, right? It's the economics 101 chart where you do your boom. That's what we're all trying to do, I think, and so I think it's the belief that being able to be a good partner means changing in ways for yourself first, where you're thinking about other people and you're thinking about this changing world, and also being willing to acknowledge that old competitors are not necessarily your current competitors in the market. There's a company out of Seattle. It's named after a river in Brazil. Right? I mean, and so there are things changing at a scale and size and fast enough where I would be very open if I were a retailer or a supplier to re-engaging how I see the world. And I think a lot of that is this belief that if I do it in the right perspective, and I put other people's needs first, then this rising tide effect can kick in. So less competition, less compliance, right? Like more partnership.
Yep, I like that. Deb?
So Jeremy, I think you said that change now is faster than ever before, and I think this is a transformational shift in how we collaborate in general. And technology and innovation is happening at a faster pace than ever before. And I think this is important, that you can reimagine how you collaborate and who you're collaborating with. Even like, if you just take a recent Uber ride, for example, you go in the Uber ride, you call it up on your phone, and then you go, it comes up and says, well, what kind of music do you want to listen to? And then you go in and it says, okay, well, I'm going to send the expense reports right to your expense report back at work, which is amazing, because now you're talking about 3 different networks, but all focused on the user experience. As retailers, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. How can we all work together collaboratively to enhance the end user's experience?
Great. So thank you, all of you, for hanging around with us to the very end. Really appreciate that. Thanks for the questions. Great job on the questions. And panel, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So thank you.